In the summer of 1787, some of the most powerful men in America gathered in Philadelphia, closed the windows, locked the doors, and swore themselves to secrecy. No reporters, no public debate, no public transcripts. Inside that room, they were not just discussing how to improve the United States. They were deciding whether to throw out America's first government and replace it with something entirely new. What happened behind those sealed doors would shape the future of the nation for centuries. But the Constitution was not born in peace and perfect agreement. It emerged from fear, argument, compromise, and one of the boldest political gambles in American history. To understand why this secret convention mattered so much, you first have to understand how fragile the United States was after the Revolutionary War. The nation was operating under the Articles of Confederation, America's first national government. But the Articles created a central government so weak that it struggled to hold the country together. Congress could not easily raise taxes. It had little power to regulate trade. There was no president to enforce national laws and no strong federal court system to settle disputes. The states often acted more like separate countries than parts of one united nation. The revolution had been won, but peace revealed a dangerous truth. The government that had helped America survive the war might not be strong enough to survive the future. As economic trouble spread and political disorder deepened, many leaders grew alarmed. Debts piled up. States quarreled with one another. National authority looked weak and uncertain. Then came Shays' Rebellion in Massachusetts, where struggling farmers rose up in anger over debt, taxes, and the threat of losing their land. To many influential Americans, this was a warning sign. It suggested that the Republic itself might be unstable. Men like James Madison and Alexander Hamilton became convinced that the country needed something stronger than the Articles of Confederation. So a convention was called in Philadelphia in 1787. Officially, the delegates were coming together to revise the Articles. But once they arrived, it became clear that at least some of them intended to do far more than patch the system. They were preparing to redesign the government from the ground up. The convention opened in Philadelphia with George Washington presiding, a symbol of authority and national trust. The secrecy was deliberate. The delegates wanted to speak freely, argue openly, and change their minds without facing immediate public outrage. So the doors stayed shut. The windows were closed. Guards were posted. The outside world was left to speculate about what was happening inside. And inside, the convention took a dramatic turn. Rather than merely amending the Articles of Confederation, the delegates moved toward abandoning them altogether. This was extraordinary. They had been sent to repair the first government of the United States, but they were now writing a brand new Constitution. In effect, they were quietly rewriting the American political system behind closed doors. Once the delegates committed themselves to creating a new government, deep divisions appeared almost immediately. One of the fiercest conflicts centered on representation. Large states wanted representation based on population, which would give them more power in the national legislature. Small states feared domination and demanded equal influence. The Virginia Plan favored the larger states and proposed a strong national government with representation based largely on population. Smaller states resisted fiercely, knowing they could be politically overwhelmed. The convention nearly broke apart over this issue. The solution was the Great Compromise. Congress would have two chambers. In the House of Representatives, seats would be based on population. In the Senate, each state would have equal representation. It was not a perfect solution, but it kept the convention alive and allowed the work to continue. But some of the convention's most important compromises were also its most troubling. Slavery cast a long shadow over the meeting in Philadelphia. Southern states wanted enslaved people counted when determining representation in Congress, even though those enslaved people had no rights and no political voice. Northern delegates objected to this, but political bargaining drove the convention toward compromise. The result was the 3/5 Compromise, which counted enslaved people as 3/5 of a person for representation and taxation. The Constitution also protected the international slave trade for a time and included provisions requiring the return of fugitive enslaved people. These were not minor details. They embedded slavery into the political structure of the new nation. The Constitution strengthened the Union, but it did so while leaving a profound moral contradiction at its core. That contradiction would haunt the United States for generations. The delegates also faced a larger and more difficult question. How do you build a government strong enough to function without making it dangerous to liberty? That was the central political problem of the convention. The framers feared disorder, but they also feared tyranny. Their solution was a system of separated powers, divided authority, and institutional rivalry. Legislative, executive, and judicial branches would each have distinct roles. Congress would make laws. The president would enforce them. The courts would interpret them. The Constitution also divided power between the national government and the states, creating a federal system. The idea was not that power could be trusted, but that power could be restrained by making different parts of government check one another. The Constitution was built on a realistic view of human nature. It assumed that ambition, self-interest, and conflict would always exist, so the structure of government had to account for that. By September 1787, the delegates had produced a finished constitution. Not everyone agreed with it. Some delegates refused to sign. Others worried that the public would reject it. But the convention had done something astonishing. It had replaced America's weak first government with a new constitutional framework designed to hold the nation together. The document then left the convention hall and entered public debate. It still had to be ratified by the states, and that fight would be fierce. Supporters of the Constitution, known as Federalists, argued that the nation needed a stronger central government to survive. Opponents, called Anti-Federalists, warned that the new government was too powerful and did not do enough to protect individual freedoms. Their resistance would eventually help bring about the Bill of Rights. So the secret convention did not end America's struggle over government. In many ways, it began a new and even larger struggle. But from locked doors, hidden debates, regional rivalries, and uneasy compromises came the document that still defines the structure of the United States today. The Constitution was not handed down in a moment of perfect unity. It was forged in secrecy, conflict, fear, and political calculation. That is part of what makes the story so compelling. America's most important governing document was born not in public celebration, but in a closed room where the future of the Republic was argued into existence.